get so that we can share this story with other folks. Welcome to our encore presentation of the National Conference Panel discussion that was called North Carolina Literacy: How Statewide Initiatives and Nonprofit Grassroots Efforts Are Working Together to Impact Student Outcomes. We are so glad that you joined us for our panel discussion. With me tonight are some incredible folks who represent these multiple efforts and initiatives that are coming together to help children become readers. I am Linda Rhyne. I'm the founding president of the Reading League North Carolina. I will be serving as our panel facilitator for today. Let me share screen and get us started with having some slides up. I'm going to hand it off really quick to our vice president, who is just going to, actually, I should probably not share. Hold on. I should probably not share for that. I'm going to hand it off to our vice president, who's just going to share for a moment a little bit about our organization.
Hi, everybody. My name is Laura. Welcome tonight. We're so glad to have you all, and thank you in advance to this panel. I got to hear them at the Reading League conference, and you all are in for a big treat tonight. Wanted to tell you just a little bit about our North Carolina chapter. We are a board of 14 volunteers. There is no staff, meaning we work on these events. We try to do as many of them for free as we can. And the thing that funds these events are member fees. So thank you to our members. If you're not yet a member, we hope you will consider joining. We just thank you all, and do want to let y'all know you'll be getting an email soon. We are actually looking for new board members. So each year we have a class that rolls, their term ends, and we bring on new folks. And we're excited to welcome some new people, but we're putting out an application. Would love to hear from you, and just be on the lookout for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Okay, now I'm going to share my screen and help get us started. First, I'll introduce some of our panel members. Okay, so Amy Rhyne, not related. We are sisters in literacy. We just happen to share our last name. Amy Rhyne currently serves as the Office of Early Learning Senior Director at NCDPI. She also served as the K-12 Director of Academic Support, pre-K-5 School Administrator, Instructional Coach, and Elementary Teacher. She was the 2017-18 North Carolina Southwest Regional Principal of the Year and co-authored a book entitled How Is That Best for Kids? Shifting School Culture with Personalized Learning. Also with us this evening, Nancy Hennessy is an experienced literacy consultant who has designed and delivered multiple professional learning events on dyslexia and the science of reading. She is the author of the Reading Comprehension Blueprint, helping students make meaning of text, and the companion text. That is the workbook and an amazing companion text. Nancy received North Carolina's Department of Public Instruction 2023 Impact Award. We also have Monica Campbell, who is a professor of education and the executive director of Lenoir-Rhyne University's Literacy Center. In addition, she serves as the instructor of the Foundations of Reading courses and is certified as an Orton Gillingham educator. Camille Walters is a UNC Charlotte alumni with a degree in special and elementary education with minors in reading education and Spanish. At UNC Charlotte, Camille was a Mebane early literacy scholar, and she currently serves as a K-5 teacher in Charlotte at Niner University Elementary. Amy Rhyne and Monica Campbell also serve on the Reading League North Carolina board as founding board members. Here's what you can expect tonight. We will begin by asking each panel member a question that helps us share a piece of North Carolina's story, and then each panel member will have the opportunity to answer our final question as well. To close, we will try to leave some time for some questions from the audience, so feel free to drop your questions in the chat, and our chat monitors will lift them up for us at the end of the session. Okay, are we ready? Let's get started. So Amy, You are our first panelist. Can you start us off by celebrating our most recent state data and sharing the history of our state's legislation's contributions to North Carolina literacy? How did we get here where we are?
Absolutely. So thank you, Linda. And I'm excited to be here today. I get to tell the story, but the story is not mine alone to tell. So this kudos to all the educators and everybody working together to make this happen. But just a little bit of history before we get into the data. On the next slide, you will see back in 2014, we began with a law in North Carolina entitled Read to Achieve. It was the Read to Achieve legislation. And the goal was for all third graders to be reading at proficiency by the end of third grade. And of course, like every other law, all you have to do is write the law and it all happens, right? So it was just that simple. Fast forward 5 years and data was not shifting or changing. But the law itself, if you read that, it was a lot more about being reactive, what you're going to do at the end of third grade, reading camps, some of the things that were going to happen toward the end of that process, rather than being proactive. And so the more we learned about science of reading and what happened in Mississippi, the law was changed and entitled in 2021, the Excellent Public Schools Act of North Carolina. So I'll go into that and break that down on the next slide for you, just to tell you a little more about what all that encompasses. I get to work with a lot of states, and North Carolina is fortunate and we are blessed to have this comprehensive approach because it's not just about the students' data at the end of third grade. It really is about how do you get there and what does that comprehensive approach look like, or that path. And the one thing that North Carolina did is all the senior leadership legislators agreed that this was an effort that we needed to join armies on or join arms for. And in this comprehensive approach, you will see that it focuses first and foremost on professional learning aligned to the science of reading, and it's named in legislation for that to be letters. We invested in teachers first, rather than focusing on students at the end, because that's the ultimate goal, obviously. But how do you make sure that your teachers get what they need and your leaders get what they need, and all your educators involved? So that's the first part of the legislation. And then the other pieces are the literacy instruction standards. And these are designed, it's supposed to be K-3, but our academic standards office did this for K-12, and this focuses on the core, the instruction. What does it look like when you walk into a classroom? What is best practices? What is best practices, and what might you see when you walk into a classroom? And that's all the way from pre-K actually through 12th grade. The other piece, if you'll kind of look to the bottom left, are the literacy intervention plans. And so each district submits a literacy intervention plan that includes their core, but it focuses on the curriculum that they're going to be implementing. What protocol do they have in place to ensure that if students aren't successful, that they have support along the way? And it also includes their reading camps, not something separate, but as an extension of that school year. And so those are submitted and they have to be approved before funding is released to the district. The other piece that happens as you filter past that from the district to the student are the individual reading plans. So if students continue to struggle, do they have an individual reading plan in place specific to the skill gaps that they have, so that you know how to focus on how to support those individual kiddos? And then, of course, we also focus on supporting and working alongside of our ed prep programs, which Monica will talk a little bit about here shortly. There is legislation basically saying that their coursework needs to be aligned to the science of reading. And then right above that, circling back around, is the Digital Children's Reading Initiative, which says we also have to have a resource online that supports our parents, our parents who support our children. So there is a resource that we've developed that is aligned pre-K through fifth grade by the skill that a child may need, or you might need to see when you're helping support those children in kindergarten, phonemic awareness, in second grade, phonics. It is broken down. And if a parent or a family doesn't have the technology, then we have to print that to make sure that they have an equitable approach to being able to support their children as well. And then across the top, we assess all of our students with one screener, which is very rare. When we talk to other states, they typically have choices, but our data is across the board using Amplified Dibbles 8. And that helps us be proactive looking at the data to progress monitor, not just do their benchmarks. So on the next slide, the cherry on top of the legislation, the best part is it's funded. Our state funded all of these components and more you're going to hear about shortly. But we have funding not only just for the first year of making sure that we have our teachers trained, but there are sustainable funds that are released every year. Talked about that literacy intervention plan. Once that is sent in, these funds are released to districts to continue to sustain this model. And we'll talk about some other ways we do that. We started with 3 cohorts in our state. Districts signed up for which cohort they wanted to be in for implementing letters. But the funding included 1 administrator per school, pre-K through 5th grade teachers, 1 instructional coach per school, all of your elementary resource teachers, and all of your elementary EL teachers were included. So we have in North Carolina 44,000 educators that were trained in letters, science of reading, aligned to the science of reading, and that continues to increase. That was in the first state cohort or state model, if you will. But since then, there have been ongoing training that I will continue to share with you here shortly. And so how do we sustain that? And this is where we're headed next. So one other thing that our state funds are 8, 1 per region, letters facilitators. So districts can save money by using the letters facilitators as opposed to having to have contracts that are sometimes a little more expensive. And so they can use these folks for free. We have online and in-person trainings that continue, and you'll see it on the top corner, just the number of training that has been offered just for that ongoing piece. These facilitators work at the state level, but they train all of our early literacy specialists, which are our coaches, 1 per district. They also train local facilitators to make sure that everything's aligned because some of our districts have spent money on making sure they have a local person in place or several local people in place to continue to train their new staff for turnover and so forth. So we're aligning from state all the way to that student to ensure that those processes and the training itself doesn't get watered down along the way. We want to keep it consistent even beyond the contract. Which takes us to what I just mentioned, that early literacy specialist model. The other thing that is funded and recurring funds are your early literacy specialists, 1 coach per district. That coach, and you think, well, how does a coach get to all those schools? The coach is there to think about the system and help support the system. So they are aligned to the Office of Early Learning. They're on our team at a state level employee, but they're assigned internally to districts, and they work with our regional consultants. So they receive ongoing training from state all the way to that district level, and they help support, not ensure, the district staff help ensure what happens and hold folks accountable. But our staff are there individually as coaches to help that ongoing sustainability for the aligned processes and resources that we continue to develop to push out to the state to say, have you considered as you're implementing, and meet districts where they are, because districts are unique based on their location, based on their size, based on their priorities. There's lots of things so that it helps us differentiate, but also meet the needs of all the districts and the amazing things that are happening across those districts in our state. And you'll see here, this is kind of what that model looks like. We have our office staff up top, DPI staff there, and how that work all aligns. But then we also dip into the districts all the way down to how you can communicate with your parents, providing resources, and your local boards. Don't forget those local boards and partners. Stakeholders are important, community partners. And then I mentioned earlier, we talked about systems. We take a framework that has about 7 components in it that are more large scale, like leadership, strategic planning, and we focus on that with the district all the way to the school level if you're working with a couple schools. But we also break it down a little bit further to literacy key indicators. So if you're supporting these systems and you're supporting at the school level, are you looking at not just did the teachers get trained, not just the student data, but what about the systems and the processes that need to be in place that support those pieces so it doesn't fall on the back of a teacher, which we often point to teachers to say, they're not doing that. There's so many things that have to happen to set a teacher and a student up for success. And these are the components that we look at and help support and meet folks where they are to say, here's some next steps where there might be gaps within these areas. So that's where I talk about the systems approach, and we focus on that with our team. And so what's happened as a result of, at the end of the year last year, if you will look at this particular graph, you will see we have in the green, these are national numbers compared to North Carolina numbers. The green represents all other users. We have every state representative. Not every state uses Amplified Dibbles 8 statewide, but every state is represented. They all, at least some parts of it, use that Dibbles 8. But you'll see the green bars from beginning of year to middle of year to end of year at each grade level compared to the gray, which is North Carolina. And you'll see in kinder, for example, we start well below the nation or the national users, and we increase by the end of the year above where the nation is performing. And you see the same trend all the way across in grades 1, 2, and 3. As you get closer to grade 3, guess what happens? You know, these students, it's a domino effect. So you have cohorts of students. So it's going to take some time to get them there. And it also gets a little tougher. So half of our state last year finished volume 2. We have to give them space and grace to understand how to learn it, then how to implement it, and then and change shifts and practices. And then you see that data start shifting. So half the state just finished volume 2. So that's going to impact the amount of growth you're seeing in some of those numbers as you hit those higher levels and those higher level skills. Long way to go. We have a lot of work. We're not going to settle for just 50-some% or 70-some%, but we are proud of and celebrate the progress we have made. And we're realists to say we also have some work to be done. So that's your beginning of year to end of year data last year. And we're seeing the same trends at the beginning of the year this year. And then when you break it into numbers, look at the difference when it's not just a percent and what's hidden in the average. Dig in within those averages. You'll see over 20,000 fewer students were below or well below benchmark over a period of where we started 3 years ago to over 33, almost 34,000 students who are now at or above benchmark. So our districts and our staff are doing amazing things to make this happen. It goes back to my statement about we can put law into place all we want, but our educators are the ones making this happen in partnership with parents and community members. So we're super excited. And then my last slide, I believe, just focuses on demographics. It's not so often that we see that every subgroup is moving in the right direction, but in North Carolina, we are seeing that when you dig beneath the average. And I would encourage every district educator to always dig beneath the average. Don't just assume because we have higher percents that some students aren't still at risk. Dig in a little deeper. So.
Thank you, Amy. Go North Carolina. Lots of good things happening. All right. Okay, next up we have Nancy Hennessy. So, Nancy, here's my question. You have contributed a lot to North Carolina's success. You've served as the former president of the International Dyslexia Association, the former board member of the North Carolina branch of the International Dyslexia Association. Your comprehension work is highlighted in letters training that our state has invested in, and you've provided deep dive dyslexia training to the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. How do you see this alignment between state level support and grassroots and nonprofit organization efforts contributing to the success in our state?
Well, thanks for that introduction, and thanks for the invitation to participate this evening. And it really is an honor to follow Amy and all the wonderful work that they've been doing in order to bring the science of reading to so many students. In response to your question, I was thinking about how you called Amy your sister in literacy. And I think as I think about that question that you just asked, there's so much work for all of us to do. And we all need to link arms and be sisters and brothers in this work, I think, so that all of our students are able to read. This is a shared mission. We all need to be thinking about purposeful connections and collaborations because our children all have the right to learn how to read. And that places, I think, an enormous responsibility on all of us, but one that just from looking at everyone who's participating this evening and so many that I've interacted with over the years, we're willing to take on that challenge. So I want to talk first of all about the International Dyslexia Association, the North Carolina branch, in order to bring forward some thinking about how important it is that we do link arms and work together to support implementation of the science of reading for all of our students. Just a little bit of history on the International Dyslexia Association, particularly the North Carolina branch. Some of you may or may not know that there's a wonderful legacy to this branch. June Lyday Orton actually moved to North Carolina after living in New York for many years with her husband, Dr. Samuel T. Orton. I think we all know that name. And began to collaborate and work with individuals at Wake Forest and at Bowman Gray School of Medicine to, first of all, serve students who had speech disorders and who had reading disabilities, but also to begin to train teachers in remedial, what was then called remedial reading. And she was very instrumental in the founding, actually, of the branch, which initially was both the South Carolina and North Carolina branch combined, all right? But eventually North Carolina and South Carolina became their own branches. She was the first president. She trained, I think there were something like 14 board members. She had trained 9 of them. And many of those individuals went on to become presidents of the branch over several years. The branch itself has over 20 board members. What we see represented here is a map with the various regions. Many of the regions, if not all, in the state are represented. This is the 2024 map. I'm sure there's a more updated one that we could be looking at as well. Candy Sellers is currently the president. Like the Reading League, this is a volunteer organization. And one of the things that I think makes this work is that the individuals are coming from across the state. They have a knowledge of what's happening in different areas of the state, but they also bring multiple perspectives. And we're always looking as an organization to work with others, such as the Reading League. So you'll see in a few moments some examples of that, but also thinking about having individuals who serve on both boards so that we can work together to achieve a mission. And you see the mission there for the International Dyslexia Association. This is all about, yes, children with dyslexia, but it's really all about all children learning how to read. The organization itself each year engages in strategic planning, and you see some of the areas in which we're working, in which the organization works. All right, now let's take a look at some of the things that the organization has done over the years, right? And I think important to point out that if one needs information on dyslexia, the branch itself has provided, and we have a YouTube channel. And I say we because I'm so connected with the International Dyslexia Association. It's difficult for me to not use we, all right? We have a dyslexia primer. Each year, the organization, the branch, has published a Dyslexia Awareness Month calendar with many, many resources. And we're always looking to partner up with other organizations. In this case, you can see sponsoring with the Fletcher School, the video, the movie on dyslexia, Blame It on Gutenberg. So throughout, I want to highlight for you these connections, these partnerships with other organizations, as well as the work that the organization, the North Carolina branch, is doing. So let's take a look at some other things that they've been engaged in. Knowing how important it is that teachers have, that educators, that literacy leaders have access to information on structured literacy. Over the last several years, the branch has been engaged in creating what we called coffee chats. You see the playlist for the coffee chats there. Those coffee chats address different systems of language, address different instructional components, addressed varied aspects of dyslexia. Always coming back to what? An increased understanding of dyslexia, but also an understanding of structured literacy. We also then created a series of what we called snapshots, and you see the playlist here, and looking at phonemic awareness, orthography, vocabulary, phonics, morphology, sentence comprehension. Again, trying to provide tools and resources, yes, for those who work with students with dyslexia, but tools that all teachers need access to in order to better meet the needs of their students. I do want to call attention to the fact that the International Dyslexia Association just celebrated its 75th anniversary. The branch isn't quite that old, but the organization is. And they published a resource that's available to all a perspectives issue on structured literacy, each of the articles being written by individuals who are well known in the field. So again, the importance of providing resource as we work together, as we link arms, so that we're all thinking about how we go about implementing the science of reading in our classrooms. All right, let's take a look at some other things that have been going on. Now, while we've had a focus certainly on dyslexia and on structured literacy, that aligns with the science of reading. And so over the last year or so, the branch also published short descriptions of the science of reading, sold a story, episode 1 and 2, and created a link. Also spoke a little bit about the aftermath of that podcast series, and then also created something on some of the myths that have to do with the science of reading. So making this connection to, while we're an organization that's dedicated to working with serving those individuals with dyslexia, the reality is structured literacy, the science of reading from which structured literacy is derived, is for all students. And keeping that in mind, keeping in mind that we need to make these connections back for everyone, supporting the good work that's being done here in the state. Yeah, go ahead. You can go to the next one. So just some further indicators of some of the things that the branch has been working on in collaboration with others. So thinking a little bit about, sharing what NCDPI has been doing, the good work of Amy Rhyne and others through a webinar that we sponsored last year. Thinking about the fact that parents really need access to more information on dyslexia, creating with ECAC, the Dyslexia Toolkit, also having discussions about dyslexia. So working with this organization, and also thinking about working with organizations such as the Reading League. And so this happens to be a book study on the book that I've written about comprehension. Reaching out to those advocacy groups, reaching out to, decoding dyslexia, literacy moms, and so on. All of this, I think, incredibly important. And always thinking about the fact that that it's these connections that we're making that allow for us to learn from one another. I have a dear friend who said to me, "We are the sum of all our teachers." I will tell you, I would not know what I know if it had not been for, yes, the experiences that I had in public school, in working in consultation with other teachers in private school, but also through these organizations in which we make these connections and in which we learn from one another. You'll note I have Candy Sellers and Laura Freeman's name here because they, of course, are the connection between Reading League and the North Carolina branch, and serving in both of those capacities and promoting then the well-being of our children. Okay, let's move on. The other thing that I've been very involved with here in North Carolina is the deep dive into dyslexia. And so I can hardly believe I've been doing this since 2016, but I was fortunate in 2016 to be asked by Lynn Mosher, who was then with DPI, to begin to create, with her input, a deep dive into dyslexia, a full day training that could be used across the state. And to train delegates, dyslexia delegates, and you see a map here that represents where we have dyslexia delegates. We have a full day training that's offered through DPI that really takes a look at the varied aspects of dyslexia. And these delegates have wonderful, wonderful training. Many of them are, in fact, letters trained. Many of them have been trained in reading research. And I think that's also the reading research practice course that's been in North Carolina for a number of years has really been a gift to educators as well. So we've trained delegates, and you can see, again, that there's a large number of them. They're able to deliver the full day training as well as webinars that have been developed by NCDPI. And I follow up with those delegates with 3 to 4 webinars that follow their training as trainers. In fact, I just did one of them last week, and interestingly enough, what we talked about was the importance of practice. So not only thinking about what structured literacy is, what are the components of structured literacy, which were represented in those playlists that you can find on YouTube. But thinking about, what is it that we need to be focused on as we move students through foundational skills, through comprehension, the ability to construct meaning of text. We need to be thinking about those phases of learning, acquisition, and then fluency, and then application or generalization, and the kind of practice that it takes. So we're always updating our thinking around dyslexia itself. Another conversation we've been having very recently is there is an initiative now within IDA to revisit the definition. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind if this is a focus that you're most interested in. All right, so let's go to the last slide. So let me again say that I think we all need to link arms, that I think this collaboration is particularly important. We all need to be speaking with the same voice so that our students benefit. You need to be aware of what others are doing, applaud their efforts, and acknowledge their successes, and encourage them in their pursuits. When we all help one another, everybody wins. And this is a particularly important challenge that we've taken on. So thanks for the opportunity. And that's some of what I've been doing and some of what I've seen work in terms of pushing an initiative forward and actually implementing.
Thank you, Nancy.
Welcome.
Okay. Monica, you are helping lead the charge at the university level for pre-service teachers. Can you tell us about how universities are coming together to change what our future teachers are learning?
Yes, thank you, Linda. The educator preparation programs in North Carolina have certainly been hard at work. So our esteemed colleague, Amy, just talked about some policies in North Carolina related to literacy instruction, but I would like to just quickly highlight how two of the most recent pieces of legislation have truly led about or caused a fundamental shift, I guess, in teacher preparation in North Carolina. And they really did so by prioritizing the science of reading and ensuring that future educators are equipped with the knowledge and skills to effectively teach all students to read. And I think this is really exciting stuff. So Section 4 of the North Carolina Excellent Public Schools Act mandates that elementary and general curriculum exceptional children pre-service teachers receive instruction aligned with the science of reading. And this law is very clear because it includes a precise definition of the science of reading, and so really addresses what the science of reading is. And then our next piece of legislation is the 2023 Appropriations Act, which prohibits the use of the 3Qing system as the primary basis for teaching word recognition. So this act then specifically addresses what the science of reading is not. So together, when we move to the next slide, these laws required all EPPs to do two things. So the first, the EPPs needed to conduct a comprehensive review of the existing programs to assess their alignment with the science of reading. And then two, the second thing, they needed to implement the necessary program revisions to ensure greater alignment. And it's important to keep in mind that for the examination of the programs, both the public and the private institutions received assistance from external evaluators. So TPI US was the external evaluator for the public institutions, while TPI US and Compass served as the external evaluators for the private institutions. So as soon as the Excellent Public Schools Act was passed in 2021, the 15 public institutions immediately began responding. So they did so by assembling a cohort of literacy fellows, and there were 8 of them. And so these were professors who were teaching courses related to the science of reading, and they applied to participate as a fellow and then were selected by a committee of reading experts to lead the charge with the science of reading alignment throughout the state. And these literacy fellows developed an impressive document. If you haven't seen it yet, you should look at it. And it's called the Comprehensive Literacy Framework and Implementation Guide. And it outlines the essential components of effective literacy instruction for pre-service teachers. And it focuses on 8 key areas. So we have the 5 big ideas from the National Reading Panel report. So phonological awareness, phonics fluency, vocab comprehension, and then this document, the UNC Comprehensive Literacy Framework, added writing, oral language, and motivation. And the framework really provides guidance for teacher prep programs to ensure that future educators are equipped with the knowledge and skills to deliver high-quality literacy instruction to their students. Also, of the 15 state institutions, 5 of the EPPs were then selected for the Literacy Innovation Leader Initiative. And that means that they received additional resources specifically for the purposes of redesigning curriculum, courses, field placements to align with that UNC literacy framework. And resources from the initiative also funded letters training for faculty, lab school teachers, teacher and principal candidates in their respective programs. So about a year after the UNC system started their work, the 31 private institutions with ed prep programs received financial assistance from a grant. It was the Goodnight Educational Foundation grant, which was awarded to NCICU, the North Carolina Independent Colleges and Universities Group. And so again, this was funded, or this grant was given so that the private schools could more closely align their programs with the science of reading according to the Excellent Public Schools Act. And like the UNC system, we began our work by creating a Science of Reading task force. And like the Literacy Fellows cohort, it was 8 members strong. What we took a slightly different approach. We began by creating a tool for the purpose of self-evaluating our courses and programs. And then that tool later served as the comprehensive framework for our program and course revisions. And our framework consists of 10 domains, the big ideas in reading instruction, with a total of 111 literacy competencies. So it's very detailed. Also, the grant funding was used for letters, professional development for 2 faculty members per institution, so for a total of 62 instructors. And we developed a comprehensive science of reading toolkit for instructors to use while developing and planning their courses. And then subgrants were also awarded to each private institution so that they could access additional resources, materials, and professional development opportunities. And a last piece of the funding went to help us host 2 summer faculty institutes so that we could really think about facilitating collaboration and share resources among faculty teaching courses related to the science of reading within those 31 private institutions. So some interesting findings. So program evaluations and subsequent revisions have resulted in several positive outcomes so far. So first of all, the letters professional development has really fostered a shared language for teaching the science of reading, the content knowledge, and instructional practices. So what we've noticed is that our pre-service teachers are now using the same terminology in the schools, classrooms, and professional learning communities during their fieldwork, internships, and student teaching experiences. Also, there's been a significant increase in the number of required field experience hours across programs, which enables our teacher candidates to gain more experience applying their knowledge and skills in classroom settings. And then finally, the final positive outcome is that EPPs have restructured their programs to include additional science of reading courses. And so this has really provided teacher candidates with a more comprehensive and in-depth understanding of the science of reading. And then I will leave you with the final area of growth that has resulted from the legislation and the work of the EPPs. So historically, the separate entities involved in teacher prep, so like DPI, public institutions, private institutions, they've kind of worked in their own silos or in isolation. But I'm excited to report that North Carolina seems to be shifting to a more collaborative approach. In the summer of 2024, so last summer, all three groups met in Raleigh for an inaugural collaborative EPP Science of Reading Summit. And the purpose of the summit was, again, to provide EPPs with additional resources and strategies to equip pre-service teachers with tools aligned with the science of reading. There were approximately 100 faculty members and DPI experts in attendance, and the day was filled with rich discussions and an abundance of learning opportunities. And my hope is that we will continue collaborating across the state as we continue to advance our knowledge and practices.
Thank you, Monica, for helping share that side of the story. What a time to decide to study to become a teacher, friends, in North Carolina. What a time. Okay, get ready, because we're going to hear from one of those educators next. I'll stop sharing my slides in a second, but Camille, I'm going to ask you our question, and then I'll stop sharing slides so that we can spotlight you. Camille, as a recent graduate and Mebane scholar at UNC Charlotte, who is now working as an EC resource teacher, how have these efforts impacted you as a student and a teacher? And what do you hope to apply to your classroom instruction?
Hi everyone. So I'm Camille. I am a current, as you guys already heard, I am a current EC teacher at Niner University Elementary. So the really cool part about that, it is UNC Charlotte's lab school. So my story actually starts at UNC Charlotte's lab school when I was a teacher candidate myself. So I started college in 2020. My sophomore year, I had the opportunity to join a cohort at Niner University Elementary, and the cohort was based on us basically learning the science of reading through letters. So I went through letters training as a sophomore in college. I was a brand new teacher candidate. It was absolutely daunting because basically I remember one of the first questions being, how did you learn to read? And I literally looked at my professor and said, I don't remember learning to read, to be quite frank with you. And so it was very challenging because reading is very complex. And so learning how to break it back down and build it back up and everything was very cool, but also daunting. So letters is the only thing I've ever known for how to teach reading. And what's amazing about the program that I went through is that we got to immediately put everything into action. So we weren't just sitting on a professional development. We then had our professors in front of us teaching the content. And immediately right after class, we went into a classroom with kids and we started practicing the science of reading. So we would do lessons that we created ourselves. Our professors would come in, they would observe us. We would have a meeting right after, talk about our glows and our grows, what we wanted to accomplish, how we felt. And so that was really amazing. And I got to do that for my sophomore and junior year. And then eventually, one afternoon, an amazing professor at UNC Charlotte, Dr. Washburn, she walks in my class and she starts talking about Niner Summer Reading Camp. And I'm like, what is this? This sounds interesting. And so basically, it was another opportunity that was offered to us to continue implementing the science of reading and practicing all that amazing work. And so basically, we would continue to work with our kids we had this year, and they would come to summer camp and we would do reading interventions. So sometimes we would use a specific curriculum. So it might be sound partners, it could be U-Fly, it might be word connections, it might be quick reads, whatever. So we would get trained in it and then we got to implement it. And it was really fun because that was another way we were learning the science of reading, but then implementing it, taking data, getting to see our kids grow. And on top of that, what was really nice is it was paid as well. And so that doesn't often happen when you're in college as a student, to have a paid opportunity to then continue practicing what you love doing. And then eventually through that work, I did Niner Summer Camp for maybe 2 or 3 years. Dr. Washburn and a whole host of other amazing professors said, well, Camille, would you like to be a Mebane early literacy scholar? And I was like, well, what is this cool new program? And so that happened my junior year, I want to say. And I was a Mebane Early Literacy Scholar all the way up until my senior year, until I graduated in May 2024. And that was another way for us to continue this work and even move past being a teacher and learning about the science of reading as a teacher, but then positioning ourselves as also voices to talk about the importance of reading and literacy and being able to work in the community more. So through that, we got to have family early literacy nights. So we went to local CMS schools and we would host family early literacy nights. And we got to talk to parents and teach them how they can help their child at home and make sure they're using practices that are good and aligned. So rather that was, hey, we can give you a retell ring, or this is what you want to do when they're reading to you or questions. So that was really fun. We got to host nights where we got to watch the film The Right to Read with other UNC Charlotte students and faculty. And we hosted a panel of our own, and we had speakers come and we got to facilitate that. So it also moved us from a perspective of just being a student and a teacher candidate, but also positioning ourselves to then be leaders and be the future teachers coming out here. And now that I am an educator, it is wild to think that this all happened before I even stepped foot into my own classroom. And that was all happening while I was in college. And I remember my first day in student teaching, I was talking to my clinical educator. And she was talking about how she had to join letters training. And I was like, really? I did that. And she looked at me and she goes, you did that? And I was like, yeah, I did it when I was a sophomore. And she was like, how? Like, you're a sophomore in college. I'm doing this and I'm a current educator. And so I didn't notice the impact of that until honestly I was in there and I was like, wow, I've been through a lot of amazing training. And I wouldn't have gone through any of that if it wasn't for UNC Charlotte, the Mebane Early Literacy Center, and all my amazing professors. So if you have spare time, look into UNC Charlotte, look into Mebane Early Literacy Center. They're doing some amazing, amazing work. I love everyone there. And as a teacher, I think it really impacted me just to understand the power of literacy. You always hear oh, you need to make sure you can read and whatnot, but through the Mebane Early Literacy Center and all the opportunities I had, I got to understand my why for this. And my big why is that I want to make sure all my babies are literate and they can read and they can comprehend it. And they're also amazing writers and they have all these tools because it can help them so much more in their life, right? When we think about big things like economic mobility and making sure they're able to move and jump those hoops and just be amazing adults, that's why literacy is important. So I was able to find my why through this. And then I was also able to make sure, I want to make sure that they're not just able to read it, but they're able to comprehend it. But then they're also able to use that language to go out there and write whatever they want to write and put it out there in the world, right? And use all these amazing tools. So it also showed me my why from why I'm in this work, which when you're a teacher is very important to remember your why. And I love that the encore of our panel fell in January because right now, as I know many of you are probably doing, I'm going through middle of year testing with all of my students, and I use the science of reading every day, and we're doing phonics right now. I teach first grade, second grade, and then I have some fourth graders on my caseload. And so I'm doing middle of the year testing right now. So we're doing dibbles, of course, and then a few extra things like core phonics surveys. And the growth that I'm seeing is absolutely amazing. And so at this point in the year, sometimes you need that reminder of middle of the year testing, especially when you're teaching, you don't always see the growth, but then you get to that dibbles testing and you're like, okay, I'm doing something. I see it, I can see the growth. So I love that our panel or the encore session fell right here because I can be like, guys, I promise it works. I'm seeing the growth now. I'm doing the science of reading. But I'll leave it on that. So all in all, I'm kind of just a product of all the amazing behind the scenes work that came all before that.
Camille, thank you so much for sharing your story. It continues to be a mic drop moment for us on this panel session. We have to save that story for last. Your story helps wrap up, right? It helps explain the impact of everything that's happening from statewide legislation, right, to these grassroots efforts, to just how we're all just linking arms in this work, right? And I'm going to say it again, because I know that there are leaders on this call too. Can you imagine having other teacher candidates come and sit in an interview seat who have this kind of experience and are ready to serve our students out the gate right after graduation? It's such an amazing opportunity for our state. What a great time to be an educator in North Carolina. Okay, I'm going to ask our panel our final question. which is knowing everything that is happening across our state with the pairing of our statewide legislation, the funding that is involved in it, the statewide system of coaching, our educator prep programs coming together and starting to make those shifts, as well as the continued support and professional development from some of these nonprofit organizations. What possibilities do you see in our future for North Carolina, and what are you hopeful for? You can just come off mute and we'll get to you sharing.
Lots of Camille's, right? Who are impacting lots of kiddos long term.
I would agree with that. That really was a model that she just presented for moving, knowledge to practice. That ability to take what it is that you're learning and to actually then go right into classroom and use it regardless of program curricula. There are many wonderful program and curricula out there, but it is the teacher knowledge that makes the difference. So that was a wonderful model. So I'm hopeful about that because you all know I was with letters in the very beginning, so I know how powerful it can be. But one has to be able to bridge, walk across the bridge and implement what it is that you've learned and use it with the program and curricula that you're implementing.
I also hope that we continue to celebrate the successes, right? There are a lot of people out there who are doing so much great work and they're putting in the time and the energy and they share their enthusiasm like Camille has done. And so I hope we continue as a state to celebrate the successes along the way.
I think that's really important. This is very hard work, very hard work.
I think for me, I hope that also I get to continue seeing other peers who are going through educated preparation programs to get this training and whatnot, because I know it's not necessarily the norm at other colleges and universities right now. And I even have friends and mentees who tell me, I don't want to teach K2 because I'm terrified to teach phonics. And I'm like, well, don't be afraid. There's supports out there and whatnot. So I just hope that we can see this work expanded to other universities as well.
Yes, thank you. Okay, are there any questions from our audience that you would like to ask our panelists or my chat monitors? Did you see anything lifted up in the chat that we could ask? If you didn't ask anything in the chat, now's the chance. Feel free to come off mute. You can ask a question of our incredible panel, or you can drop it in the chat and we'll give you time to type.
However, if you are a leader, you cannot recruit Camille.
That's right. She's taken, friends. She's taken. I will just say while we're giving you a chance, and we won't leave before you have the chance if you need some wait time on your questions, but I will just say thank you for being here tonight and joining us for hearing this story. This panel has been such a blessing for us to be able to share all of the great things that are happening in North Carolina. It is a moment for us to share the highlights of the hard work that is happening. We are dropping in the chat. These are links related to the work that we shared this evening. And so if you want to explore some more, they're in the chat, but also know that we will be sending a follow-up email. We'll make sure to get the recording out to you, as well as any of the other resources that were discussed this evening. We'll make sure to link those for you so you have some easy access in addition to what is listed here. And then another reminder, thank you to the Reading League North Carolina for helping us host this panel session. And we invite you to learn more about our organization and join. Well, it looks like we do have a question in the chat. I'm going to read it. Thank you, Hannah. All right, panelists, here it is. You can see it in the chat, but I'll read it for our recording as well. Are there statewide initiatives geared toward adolescent literacy in the works? We love the work being done in early literacy, but are also wondering about our tweens and teens who might have missed this instruction early on, excuse me. I think that one's for you, Amy.
So I can, we have sent a request in our long session this year to our legislators to ask if they would consider funding our 6 through 8 grades. And so we are just waiting to hear responses. So, but there has been a request, and I know there is a lot of interest in that from leaders across the state as well, not just our educators, but also some of your, many of your politicians and those who are making policymakers.
Yeah. Actually, North Carolina IDA has a day of dyslexia focused on adolescent literacy. I forgot to mention that when the slide was up. That's February 28th at the Hill Center. Fletcher School is a satellite location, and there will be 2 follow-up webinars to that as well, I believe in March and April. So yeah, it's a really, really critical topic. Yeah.
Yep. The Reading League National also released an adolescent literacy page on their Compass resource as well. So it is certainly a hot topic right now. Okay, it looks like we have another question from James. How are or how could EPPs and districts collaborate at a systems level to establish a pipeline for high quality literacy instructional support? As a principal, thank you, James. He sees teachers who are reticent to adopt the science of reading, which of course we address, but is there space for support for teachers in this regard?
Monica, that's all you. I'm going to defer to Monica on this one. She's doing a great job out there. So,
Well, it's a great question, and I think part of it has to do with EPPs increasing their visibility in schools and working with district leaders and school leaders and providing some professional development as well. I mean, I think that that's one thing that LR is working on doing now, and joining PLCs and leading PLCs and I don't know, joining as true collaborators, right? And not necessarily as experts in the field, because we're all learning, we're all doing this very difficult work together. So I do think part of it is, increasing that visibility and being more intentional about working together. It's a beautiful question. I'm going to really think on that.
And James, I would say our nonprofit, the Reading League, really tries to be a place where an educator can come and learn with a wider community, no shame, no judgment, and just wanting to share knowledge and learn from each other. So we hope that we're doing that sort of care for those educators out there.
I also know that some of our educator prep programs are seeking to offer professional development opportunities, like the upcoming Mebane Early Literacy Summit at UNC Charlotte, which is hosted it's a limited registration. I think registration is now closed, but keep an eye out on it for the next time it opens up. So I do think that there is also an effort for some of our university partners seeking to host some of those free opportunities as well. All right, great questions, y'all. Anything else? Yes, the Mebane Early Literacy Summit will be hosted every year. So certainly get on their email list so that you know what's going on. We also, the Reading League North Carolina has been trying to make sure to share it as well. Any other questions, friends? Okay, well, if you feel so moved, I invite you to use your React button to give our panelists a virtual thank you for their time and their stories this evening. And I'm going to give all of you a heart reaction because I just want to thank you for sharing the love of literacy with us tonight. You'll be hearing from us soon. Thanks, everybody, for being here.